أعوذ بالله من شر الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على رسول الله وعلى آل بيت رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. So inshallah, tonight we are going to talk about the Quranic view on supplication. We have a lot of information on supplication, on dua and importance of dua. But when we come to the Quranic view, it is more, let me say, more accurate, and it is more. It has certain insights that we don't know when we usually dig with the Quranic view on supplication, like how Quran views supplication and what are the some of the supplications that the Quran enforces. Like there are certain supplications where the Quran favor certain supplications over others. So let's just start. Okay, so let's just start, and we will start with this ayah in Surah Ghafir. No, this is not in Surah Ghafir, I'm mistaken. So this ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and your Lord says, call upon me, I will answer you. Surely those who are too proud for my worship shall soon enter hell abased, like, so they will be entering hell. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that, Allah said that, we have to call upon Him. And what happens after that, the answer that comes, I will answer you. So this is what we understand basically from the ayah. Like after dua, id'uni, after you call upon me, I will answer. But what more important in this ayah, what we want to talk about is that here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making a relation between his worship and dua. So he said, call upon me. And then he said, surely those who are too proud for my worship, like they don't want to do this worship, they have so much proudness, they don't want to do this worship, they will enter hell. So at the beginning of the ayah, he said, call upon me, make a dua. And then the other part of the ayah, he says, those who are too proud of worship, which means that dua is a kind of worship. Dua is a part of worship. So this verse, which invites mankind to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises the answering and goes even further by naming the prayer as worship. And this is the important part. Prayer here, it's called to be as a worship. Dua here is a ibadah, as a worship. Rather, this ayah, it equates, it makes it equal, like the worship with the prayer. So it threatens with hell those who do not pray for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those who do not do supplication for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And such a threat can only be justified when anyone who neglects worship. Like why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to threat someone that he's going to be in hell if he does not make a worship. But here he's saying worship is like supplication, is like dua. Dua is a supplication. So that's why here this ayah gives us the importance of making dua, the importance of calling on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's not the physical part of it, it's not the, just, raising our hands and saying few words. No, it is the deep meaning of the dua, which is manifested by which shows the real humbleness of the person, like the real that he's so needy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he's so weak, and he needs Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala constantly. So that's why he goes for dua. So that's why from starting from this ayah, we should not underestimate the importance of dua. We should not consider that okay, worship is something different than dua. If I am doing worship, if I'm doing my prayers, whatever, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked me to do in terms of worship, and I'm not doing dua, that's fine because I'm doing worship. So here, as if this ayah is showing us that those who do not feel that they are needy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not an act of just a physical behavior, as I said, like where we just, raise our hands, please Allah give me this and this. No, it is a sense in our being deep inside that we are entities that we need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always. So that dua that will come out from that sense of neediness, that I am so needy, I cannot do anything without the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will take me to the step where I ask His help. That's why we see in Surah Al-Fatiha, when we say إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, we start with إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ, like, okay, you, I worship you. But after that, right away, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, like, I ask help. So there is a relation between asking help and worship. It's not that, if I'm doing worship, then that's fine. If I'm not doing dua, no. If I'm not doing dua, if I'm not calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there's a problem in my worship. That's why إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ comes first, and then إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Like it is like you we worship, and you we ask help. You know, so it's not that there are two like different compartments. If I do one of them, I'll be fine. No, it shows that ibadah, worship, will not be enough, it will not be complete until we reach that stage where we feel that sense of needness for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and will drive us to do a continuous dua or supplication. And maybe it will be a state of needness in the heart, like I always in my heart feel that I need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I ask His help. It is not necessary to be done by the tongue, but it's a sense of heart, it's an act of heart. So therefore the prayers is not just an important type of worship, dua, supplication, it is the foundation of worship. This is really important. That's why Rasulullah says that the dua is the weapon of a believer. If you do worship and you don't do dua, then you don't have, you don't have a good foundation. So we have to really here to know the importance of making dua. So this verse of the Quran is one of those that raises some questions. In the verse, which is, let me get it back, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, call upon me, I will answer you. Surely those who are too proud for my worship shall soon enter hell. In this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guarantees not to turn away any supplicant empty handed. Like, yeah, I will, fulfill your needs, and to approve every petition to His servants placed before Him. Like, any petition, any dua is made by any supplicant, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised in this ayah and other ayat that He's going to guarantee, the answer. However, in practice, we see that although people continuously they ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to answer their prayers, some of those applications, or I don't know how much, remain unfulfilled. And we have, all of us will have these experiences. Like, and now when I was just telling you just a little bit before that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guaranteed in the Quran that He's going to answer all prayers, maybe you have, thought about it this way, like, okay, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guaranteed, why He didn't fulfill my other, dua, why He didn't answer this call, why He didn't fulfill this. So many of our supplications remain unfulfilled. And this is a question that we should ask, like, why? Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala won't break His promise. His promise is a promise. If He said He's going to fulfill our du'as, then he's going to. Then how can we understand this? So if we compare the volume of requests that are placed before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the number of individuals who say that, okay, I've made supplication, but my supplications were not successful. There are a large proportion of people who say that. I see a lot of people where they say like, I made a dua, but it didn't go through. Like it didn't work. So at this point, the reactions of those supplicants of us will take different forms. So everyone's interpretation of the outcome will depend on his level of insight and understanding. So one type of people will just be pessimistic right away, and he will maybe blame Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he will say, oh my God, I asked you a lot but you didn't do it. And he will say, he will start doubting all of these ayat, he will start doubting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he will take that part because his insight and his understanding is not complete, is not Quranic. We have to understand how Quran talks about dua, about supplication, so we know if my dua, my supplication fulfills the criteria or not. How can I know? Like maybe the dua that I am making does not fulfill the criteria, so it gets the answer. So that's one type of people who refuse, who step back. They would say, okay, that's we did it and it didn't work. So, but the one who knows the actual concept of supplication and the criteria for that and how to be done and what he should ask for and why sometimes the supplication doesn't get answered, and he know the consequences, he gets an enlightened view about what has happened. And whereas those who are pessimistic and who possess gloomy ideas, they view the matter in a different light. They will not like it. But those who know why, or who knows the criteria, they will know that there is a reason for that, and they will not enter into that desperate state. So as a result, frequently people whose supplications have not been answered and whose outlook is superficial, they will become, they will become disappointed. They enter despair, and they may turn their back on their faith, and maybe they will not reflect even on how deny Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala omnipotence, that who al qahir. So some people, they will do that, like we can see this in our lives, like, yeah, I asked but he didn't give me. Surah al-Baqarah has an ayah which is the ayah 186. Again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and when my servants asks you concerning me, then verily I am near. I answer the prayer of the supplicant when he calls on me. So let them respond to me and believe in me, so that they may rightly guide it. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. So again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah, He's making another promise that when my servants, like, oh Muhammad, sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, when my servants ask you about me, I am near. I am surely near. I answer the prayer of the supplicants when he calls on me. So the Allama here in his Tafsir al-Mizan, he says that this ayah has like seven magnificent points where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing how close he is from his servant, and how surely he is going to answer the prayers. So the first thing he says that the whole verse is based on that first person singular pronoun, which it's my, like when my servants ask you concerning me, then very I am near, I answer when he calls on me. So the whole verse, it just has that first person singular pronoun, which shows the great importance of the speaker. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like use it, like, you know his his showing that these servants are mine, you know and they call me. So it shows like a kind of attachment to the subject, you know like those are my servants, me. So It's not like when he uses we, the royal we, to show that greatness. Here is showing importance, that he himself is like my servants. So this is really important. Then when we come to the words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said my servants, and when my servants ask you concerning me, he didn't say my people or other words. Why? Because as if he's emphasizing that those who are asking, they are my servants. They are not just any people. They belong to me. They are my servants, and that not my people even. No. So it shows something of like kind of privacy, or like kind of owning. He owns those servants. So this is also really important. So also the reply that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replies after that, then verily I am near, starts just after the question, without any kind of, any kind of, barrier, or any kind of perimeter, like someone in the middle. So he says, when my servants ask you concerning me, okay, then verily I am near. All other ayat in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he starts with this, and when my servants ask you. So there's other ayats that says, okay, when my servants, or when people ask you about, for example, moon, say it is this. So he answers, when he gives the answer, he say. When they ask you about this, say this. When they ask you about menses, say this. When they ask you about, say this. But here, when my servants ask you concerning me, he didn't say. He just right away said, then verily I am near, which means that he is that near. He does not need any kind of, anyone in the middle to just connect connect us with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the other part of it is that the nearness of the speaker, which is described with the adjective near and not with any verb. So he didn't say, when my servants ask you concerning me, then I will come near, or I come near. It's an adjective, so it's a noun, which means that he's already near. He's not waiting for a time. Come, like I will come near, or I will be near. It's a verb, which means that it requires a tense, requires a time. But since he didn't say that, he just used the adjective that I am near, it shows that he's always near. He always remain near. It does not change with time. He's already near, he's in the future near, he's now near. So it's not like related to any time. The other part is that the ayah also mentions answering the prayer with the verb in the present tense, which when we say in the present tense, which means both the present and the future tenses. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, okay, when my servants ask you concerning me, then verily I am near, I answer. So just follow the words in red. I answer, which means it is present right now. And the present in the Arabic language, like I answer, means that I answer right now, and I will continue to answer the prayers in the future, which means that he's not also specifying to like just now. And this is also really important. So these are some points that Al-Alama At-Tabatabai mentions in Tafsir al-Mizan to highlight the importance and how much importance has been attached to answering of prayers. Like to this degree, with all of these things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like this phrase. So in addition, this verse, as it's it's a short verse, but it repeats the first person singular pronoun 7 times. 7 times it's repeated. And it is the only verse in the Quran which has this characteristics. And the only verse, if you open the whole Quran, this is the only verse that you can find there, which uses a first person singular pronoun 7 times in one ayah, in one verse. All of this just to highlight how much importance has been attached to answering prayers. Answering prayers. So the question that arises here is that why do the prayers of supplicants go unanswered despite God assurance that is going to be answered. So here, some scholars they have made some attempts in order to understand this, and they said there may be some possibilities. So we are going to see what they suggested, these possibilities, and then we are going to comment over these possibilities. So one of the reasons scholars said is that the acceptance of prayer depends on many conditions, and the most important of which, the most condition, which is the acceptance of prayer like depends on, is inner purity. You have to be pure from inside. You have to have a clean heart. You have to be free from sins as much as possible. Like, yeah, no one is free of sins completely, but as much as possible. Also, like we should have absence of pollution, um, like inside pollution from excessive sinning, from disobeying Allah Subhanahu wa Taala commands. So this is because disobedience of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala here is the main rejection of supplications, and it deprives man from attaining God's abundant grace and bounties, because disobeying, it will create a status of inner pollution, and this will have, then will not be inner purity, and this will affect the relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is one possibility that they said it could be a reason for that. And we see this in Dua Kumail, subhanAllah, every time we have this night that Imam Ali mentions that are some sins that we do that they prevent the dua, Allahumma ighfir li dhunuba, like التي تهتك العصا ولا تحبس الدعاء. Like there are certain types of sins that they doesn't make the dua, answered. So this is one part. The other, and this is important if we're gonna go back to the other ayah. This is how can we link it to the ayah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, look what he said. He said, and when my servants ask you concerning me. He didn't say when people ask you concerning me. Here, the word servant has a very profound meaning, because if someone is servant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means he's doing servitude for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then which means that he's not disobeying, which means that he's obeying. That's why if you remember that when we were talking about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what did we say? That the highest status that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to any prophet is the status of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa wasallam, when he described him in Surah Al-Isra, and he said that he has, Subhanallah, the Asra bi abdihi, like he took him in a night walk from, a masjidul, like in the Mi'raj, in the Ascension. So he mentions him as abdihi, as my servant and his servant. So the more someone, like, sorry, I have to, yeah. So the more people, the more someone obeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more he is a real servant. The more he obeys his own desires and his own ideals and his own wishes and his own nafs, then he's not a servant for Allah. He's a servant for himself, or a servant for his desires, or a servant for other idols. So here what I want to say is that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that I will answer, there is a kind of condition that has been, not a condition, but there's a word that has been stated at the beginning, which clarifies that those prayers that are going to be answered, they are going to be made by servants. They are not going to be made by any people. So pure servants are servants who serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not themselves or their desires, which means they obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this kind of servitude that they do, like they before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the thing that gives them that opportunity that their prayers are going to be answered. So I cannot say that here it's a condition, but you know, but just mentioning servants at the beginning will make us reflect more on the first reason that the ulama mentioned, that the scholars mentioned, that you should have an inner purity, that you should have, like you should following Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command. Because if you are following Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command, then you are a servant. You are not following yourself's command. So that's why, part of it to be a servant. When you are a servant and you do a dua, then your prayers is more likely to be answered. But you have to be a servant, at the beginning. So once you do a dua, you have to be a servant. I'm trying just to understand it. Once you do a dua, you have to be a servant. And being a servant is not that just I be a servant one time, is that you are a servant. This is your status. Okay, I know, I understand, and I can know from myself how we fluctuate between serving our own desires. But we have to try our best to be those servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all the time. So the second reason that some of the scholars mentioned that why the dua sometimes is not answered, is that related to the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of whatever it is the best interest for an individual, which is based on wisdom. And we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Hakim, He is wise, as well as His all encompassing knowledge, Wal Alim, He knows everything over all matters. So this will result in the acceptance of supplication and rejection of others, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is definitely more aware whatever is beneficial for an individual, even more than the individual himself. you know so based on this, if we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes for something, and that thing is not for our own sake and for our best interest, then that prayer is not going to be answered. So here we have one ayah in the Quran that mentions something like that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Isra, He says, and man supplicates for evil as he supplicates for good. And man is ever hasty, like he's very, like, he wants his things very quickly. He cannot wait, he's impatient. He's like, he always, when he wants something, he just want it right away. So here, I don't know, if we reflect on this ayah, it is somehow, it gives us that insight that, hey, wait a moment, before you ask something, are you sure that it's good for you or not? Because sometimes we ask for things that we assume it is good for us, but eventually, as if when we ask for it, as if we are asking for something evil, but we don't know that. We are not aware of that. You know why we do that? Because we are impatient. We cannot wait. When we want something, it means that we want it right away. That's why we go and directly we ask for it. So here Alama says that man prays and asks for evil the same way as he prays for good. The same way, he does not know that whatever he's asking for is evil. He thinks that he's good. He's asking for something good because his knowledge is very limited. He cannot foresee the future. He cannot know what's hidden. He cannot know what's better for his other life. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describing the human beings as hasty, as like some people that they want their things really fast, means that when he wants something, that man when he wants something, that woman when she wants something, we does not take the time to pause and think about its benefit and harm. We just want it. We just want it. We just want it, like little kids. We just want it. We don't, like say, okay, let me pause a while, let me think for a while. Is it good for me or not good for me? And I know what you are thinking right now is that most of the time we don't know that whether it's good for us or not good for us. So that's why instead, as Alama says, this is a human being. he will be like he wants his things quickly. He will be hasty in pursuing it, and as soon as he thinks of it and he desire it, will and even it's evil for him or harmful for him, he just want it, you know. So here I'm just thinking like you, that okay, how do we know? Like, if I need something, how can I pause and reflect, and I say, and I know whether it is good for me or not good for me, whether shall I do this or shall I not do? Shall I take this decision or not? So here there are some other ayat in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that those people who have taqwa, those people who are God conscious, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant them with a kind of light. And that kind of light they will be able to see which is good, which is not. So probably when I think about it myself, like why most of the time I am kind of struggling taking some decisions or thinking about whether this is good or not, probably because we don't have that deep insight. We are not clean enough. We are not really God conscious. So we don't have that wisdom in order to differentiate. So that's why some scholars they say, when you want something, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you the best with whatever He knows it's the best. You know, like you could ask for things specifically, of course, but the best that we can say is that if it's good for me, then give it to me. If it's not good for me, don't give it to me. So we should not, when we ask about something, like be 100% sure that we are asking is something good for us, unless it is something related to al-akhirah, related to, elevating our status in this dunya and the other dunya. Those are the supplications that won't be rejected, and we are going to talk about it. So here an individual only like views matters that affect himself or is just limited knowledge. However, since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is his all encompassing knowledge, does not consider every prayer eligible for acceptance, because sometimes you pray for something that you want but it's not good for you. For example, like I want a good car, I want a fast car, I want a, I don't know, car in these times, I want this. But sometimes, okay, if you get the car, for example, I'm just giving a silly example. So if you want that car, then once, maybe you will do an accident and you will lose your life, for example, or anything like that. So we will be running after things that if we know that they are bad for us, they are not good for us, even ourselves, we won't ask for them. Even at an individual level, if we know that, okay, if this is going to happen with me, if I take this choice and I ask this and I get it, then I don't want it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already knows that. And He says, okay, like I'm not going to give you that, because if you know whatever I know, then yourself, you won't ask for it, you know? And this is what Al-Alama says, that if a man knew the fact, if we know for a fact that, for sure, that whatever is we are asking, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for, and we don't get it, if it's bad for us, even ourselves, we don't want it anymore. We just want to say, no, as if you want to say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like, I'm sorry, I was so mistaken. I didn't know that this would happen. Can you get it? Can you take it back? So here, when our answers doesn't get, our prayers doesn't get answered, maybe we can pause and reflect. Maybe it's not good for me right now. Maybe I will have the right time. Maybe another time will come. Maybe if I have this, this will happen. Maybe this is a better situation. Who knows? So, although these are the two main explanations that some scholars, give on the question that why our prayers are not answered. But according to one of the scholar where I got this research from, he's Said Mushtabalai, he says that for there are not really fully satisfactory answers from a Quranic point of view. Okay, so they could be partially true, they could be true sometimes, But in the Quran, there are more deep answers for that, you know? So, and such answers, as we were, talking a bit earlier, they do not really completely elevate the curiosity of the questions that, that we had. As you saw, we had so many questions, like why this and why this. So those two main explanations that we talked about, they are they are not enough in understanding why our supplication doesn't get answered, especially that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has stated in the verse that he guarantees to answer every supplication. So here, from the first sight, it seems kind of complicated, or not complicated, contradicted. That he said that he's going to answer every prayer. So why prayers are not answered? So that's why we go for the Quran, and we can take more deep insights. So if we begin to examine the verses of the Quran with some, deepness and thoroughness, we find that the kinds of supplications that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guaranteed to answer have a particular formulation. And by observing and following this particular formulation, one can be more expectant of the acceptance of his prayer. So, um, those also the Quran illustrates like the paradigms for supplication, so that God's servants, they can really go for these supplications with sincerity and every hope for acceptance. So the Quran has these answers. So, which is the third point and the third reason, which we may say it's a third reason why our prayers doesn't get answered. So the supplication must be the supplication. So the supplication must be in synchronicity, synchronization with the human's progress towards perfection, and in harmony with the consistent movement of creation towards perfection. Okay, I'll pause a while and I'll explain this. Um, if we want to ask ourselves why we are here, and why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created human beings, and what is the purpose of human beings being in this life. We may come up with different answers. That okay, some people will go back to the Quran and will say, yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says we are here to do worship, and this is not a complete answer, and this is just part of the answer. So that big picture, which is the reason of existence of the human beings, and that question that every one of us should always think about, and you always want to have an answer. And if any one of us doesn't have an answer for such a question, like why I am here, then there's a problem. Like probably he's not settling down. He feels that okay, there's something that I am missing. Like there's something I need to know. So any human being with consciousness, he wants to know why he exists and why I am here. Surely we are not here to live that animal life, to just do all of these things every day as a robot. So we are here for a bigger purpose. I don't want to go too much into the subject because it's a subject which is different from the topic of tonight. But um, we are here for something called perfection, to attain something called perfection, to attain something called I can say proximity from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But how this proximity, how this is qurb from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala happens through perfection. I want to be that better version of me every day. I want to perfect myself. I want to perfect my moral behaviors. I want to perfect my inner heart. I want to perfect every aspect of me so I become that better person every day from all aspects. So that's why we are here. So this soul, which has been descended into this materialistic body and for in this world, is here to cross this trip, to make that trip. It has been descended from that upper place into that lower place, has been in that vessel, which is that car, which is the body, in order to move to the other world. It has to cross a stage called perfection. If we die before reaching perfection, or without being aware that we have to perfect ourselves, then as if we didn't live, as if we didn't fulfill our purpose of existence. So that's why even the supplication that we make, it should go in harmony and be very synchronized with that purpose, the purpose of us as a human beings moving towards perfection. So if we have any dua that we make or any supplication that is not in harmony with this goal, with this trip, then it's not going to be answered. Why? Because um, moving towards perfection means that I want my better version of myself in order to pass the grade in the hereafter. I want to be that better version. So in the hereafter, I go to that high status and proximity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so I pass that test. So if I'm going to ask anything that is going to be opposing to my journey of towards perfection, and is going to affect my status in the hereafter, then that dua is not going to be answered. For example, I may ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like, okay, give me, for example, millions of dollars, for example, let's say that. Although it's a very silly, it's not something really important to ask about. So if we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something like that, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that if such a human being takes like a certain amount like that, he will not be a servant. He will waste the money. He will do this. He will disobey. So that request, that supplication that he made, it does not go in harmony for his with his progress towards perfection. Actually, it does not benefit him in the hereafter. It's not just in this dunya. For him to be that perfect human being, that dua that he made, it doesn't go along. So that's why here the prayers is not met. So this is when the prayers will be met. If we want our prayers to be met and our desires to have that response and answered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should ask for things that they are related with our progressing towards perfection. That's why we see a lot of, if we want to look into the supplications that is made in the Quran by the prophets, they are those type of supplications that they um, they always target the hereafter. They do not target any worldly affair. They do not target any matter affair. Even when they target any matter affair, any worldly affair, they target it for the other dunya. So there are some examples for that. I don't know if we still have time. I think we don't. Okay. So I'm going to end up with this and we continue other next time, inshallah. So, in other words, the supplications of a servant in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala must be consistent and compatible with the objectives of creation of man. It should be linked with those objectives. So that were the supplication, that supplication that would extend the vision of a man to the boundaries of those spiritual realms. It's not just restricted to this dunya. Those are the supplications that opens that man to the other spiritual realms where he can grow, and it helps him in his development in every aspect in his life in order to achieve that elevated status and that spiritual status. So it helps him to be more close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why we will see later, inshallah, that this is a true supplication. The supplications that we make that are related with our perfection and growth and own development, those are supplications that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to the Quran, He will never, never not address. He will always address it. So the majority of the prayers that are done by mankind are most of them, if you look at the prayers that we do most of the time, they are empty of any spiritual motivation. They don't have any spiritual content, you know. They are just a bunch of supplications, uh, personal ones, for personal desires, for something to be relieved from, daily hardships, I don't know, daily needs. And I'm not saying that we should not ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that. We should do. But here we are saying that what are those supplications that will be 100% answered? Are those who have those spiritual motivation. So those, when we say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, perfect me. Oh Allah, make me closer to you. Oh Allah, take me out of my ugly self. Oh Allah, take my ego out. Oh Allah, make me closer to you. Oh Allah, like allow me to talk to you through the nights. Wake me up for Fajr prayer. Wake me up for, night prayer. Allow me to read Quran. Like allow me to change my bad behavior that I have. Allow me to stop being arrogant. Allow me, please help me to, be humble. Please open my chest to knowledge. All of that, all of such type um, uh, of supplications will be answered. Why? Because they are in synchronization with the progressing of that human being towards his own perfection. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is what He wants. He wants us to move forward. So if we are going to ask for these things, we are going to get them, Other worldly affairs, it's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His wisdom to decide, whatever better. But those kind of prayers, they will be definitely answered according to the Quran. So, inshallah, we are going to continue this next time because it, it's a topic that we are going to cover over a few other nights. And we have some examples. We are going to see how Prophet Zakaria alayhi salam, when he wanted to have a son, he didn't say, I want a son. I didn't say, he said, I want a successor. So probably when we, go and read these ayat about all of the prophets making supplications, we may see that they are tied to dunya, but they are not tied to the dunya, to this dunya. They are tied to the akhirah. And we're going to see more examples of Prophet Zakaria, Prophet Sulaiman, Prophet Ibrahim, other prophets. So inshallah, we'll continue this next time, and we will go for other reasons for understanding the supplications and why it's not answered. There are other reasons. We just covered like three so far. So inshallah, we will continue this next time. Wa sallallahu ala rasulillah wa ala ali bayti rasulillah.